Hello everyone, welcome to Tangled Threads. If you enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to our channel. Let's go. In the beginning, things were nothing short of idyllic. I was fresh into my sophomore year at Farnsworth University, and, as luck would have it, I had been matched with a roommate named Greg. Greg was a study in contrast to my gregarious, often chaotic demeanor. He was studious, meticulous to a fault, and had an intriguing sense of humor that was dry enough to make a desert feel like a tropical rainforest. After the initial week of jovial back and forths and gradually figuring out our routines, we seemed to have settled into a pleasant living situation. However, on one otherwise tranquil Sunday evening, Greg surprised me. "Tom," he began, while diligently cooking his signature spaghetti bolognese. He had a way of sounding earnest, even when discussing the most trivial matters. "Yes, Greg?" I replied, peeling my eyes from the dense textbook in front of me. "I've been thinking about our shared expenses, and I believe we should restructure them." I looked up, eyebrows furrowing. His pale blue eyes held a sincere glint, his thin mouth pulled in a line of anticipated argument. "What do you mean?" I asked, placing my pen down. "Well," he said, stirring the simmering sauce absent-mindedly, "it seems to me that the bills are slightly uneven. I propose that you cover the rent in full, while I handle the groceries and the Wi-Fi." I felt my cheeks flush immediately, an inferno raging on my face. I was taken aback not by the proposal but by a strange sense of wounded pride. However, rather than vocalize my actual feelings, I found myself digging into a position of irrationality. "No, that's unfair," I blurted, my words as impulsive as my rising heartbeat. Greg paused, his forehead creasing into a frown. "How so?" he asked, leaning against the kitchen counter. "It just is," I stammered, flailing for an explanation. "If I pay all the rent, it can't be even." His thin lips parted in surprise, his blue eyes glinting with bemusement. "But I did the math already, and it adds up more even than before." But I cared not to listen. Over the next hour, Greg tried to explain his reasoning, his calm demeanor sharply contrasted by my stubborn refusals. Despite his patient efforts, I could not, or would not, see his perspective. Frustrated and unwilling to back down, I drafted a letter to the dean, detailing our impasse. In response, we were promptly summoned to a meeting. Dean Hathaway was a stout man, his round glasses perched precariously on the bridge of his large nose. His study, lined with dusty tomes and collegiate accolades, was as imposing as the man we arrived at our resident advisor's office just before noon, the sunlight filtering through the window blinds. Robert, our RA, was a graduate student, significantly older and more experienced than us. His office was a medley of order and chaos. Stacks of textbooks and papers contrasted with an impressive collection of university paraphernalia and superhero action figures. Robert himself was an interesting blend of scholar and comic book enthusiast. Tall, with glasses perpetually sliding down his nose, he looked every bit the stereotypical nerd. But his approachable demeanor and knack for problem-solving had earned him respect among the residents. We sat across from him in his cramped office, the wooden chairs slightly too small for comfort. Greg seemed a little out of sorts, his usually calm demeanor replaced by a mild anxiety. "All right, guys," Robert began, adjusting his glasses and leaning on his desk strewn with papers and textbooks. "Let's hear it." Greg began to outline his suggestion. "Robert, I propose that Tom pay the full rent, while I would cover the groceries and Wi-Fi bill. It seems fair considering the total expenditure." "But it's not fair," I interjected before Greg could delve into the details. Robert looked taken aback. "How so, Tom?" "If I pay all the rent, it just can't be even. Greg is taking advantage of me," I argued, my voice betraying my inexplicable irritation. The room fell silent, except for the distant hum of the air conditioner. Greg sighed softly, pinching the bridge of his nose. Robert regarded us both carefully, his eyes flickering back and forth as if watching a tennis match. The meeting progressed with little resolution. Greg attempted to clarify his logic, only to be interrupted by my firm, albeit misguided, refusal to see his point of view. Robert, patient as ever, listened to our back and forths, interjecting occasionally to steer the conversation back on track. Finally, after what felt like hours of fruitless debate, Robert leaned back in his chair, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Tom," he said, his voice bearing a trace of exhaustion, "I understand your concerns, but it seems you are being unreasonable." His words echoed in the small office, stinging more than I cared to admit. Robert continued, "Looking at the total expenditure, Greg's suggestion seems fair. The imbalance you're feeling doesn't really exist. We left the office in silence, the reality of the situation hanging heavy in the air. Robert's verdict rang in my ears, a blunt reminder of my stubbornness and misplaced pride. The chance to admit my mistake had presented itself, yet I dug my heels in further, causing a rift that would strain my relationship with Greg for the remainder of our cohabitation. I was seething. I felt the verdict was an insult to my judgment, a dismissive pat on the head. I was not being unreasonable. I was standing up for what I believed was right. Surely the person bearing the brunt of rent should not be I. But within the fortress of my indignation, a small voice was whispering. It said I was wrong. It urged me to apologize, to reconcile, to retreat from the brink of this needless cliff. But I shushed it, choosing to be ruled by pride instead of reason. Greg offered a feeble attempt at reconciliation. "Tom, we can still negotiate the bills," he suggested, his tone soft. "You don't have to feel cornered." But I was far from being cornered. I was a warrior standing on a battlefield of perceived injustice, ready to fight to the end. "No, Greg," I replied, my tone final. "It's not right and it'll never be." Days turned into weeks and the tension grew. I paid more than my fair share of the bills, not as a concession, but as a statement of my defiance. I was not the one at fault. In the end, the discord became unbearable. My once promising academic journey was overshadowed by the irrational battle I was waging against an imagined injustice. I decided to drop out of college, seeing it as the only way to escape the situation. Leaving Greg behind, I moved back to my hometown. Even then, my pride remained unbroken. I narrated my tale of battle to anyone who would listen, casting myself as the hero wronged. I made my departure from Farnsworth University sound like a strategic retreat, a stand against an unjust system. But deep down, a tiny voice kept whispering. It told me I was wrong, that I had let my pride destroy a promising friendship and an opportunity for a quality education. But I silenced it, every time. I was not in the wrong, I told myself, as I settled into my old room in my parents' house, my college dreams a casualty of my irrational war. As I stared at my reflection in the mirror, I couldn't help but wonder, was I the hero of my story, or the architect of my downfall? But pride, my relentless companion, answered for me, "You are the hero, you always were." And so, I held on to my narrative, becoming a prisoner of my own obstinance. I was the man who left college to stand up to a perceived injustice, even if no one else could see it. I became my own hero. Update. Things have taken an even worse turn. When I returned home, fresh from my triumphant departure from Farnsworth University, I imagined I would be greeted as the hero of my own story. I assumed my parents, after hearing of my ordeal, would welcome me with open arms, proud of their son's unyielding spirit. You see, it was my decision to attend college in the first place. I was the one who begged my parents to send me to Farnsworth University. I had sold them dreams of a bright future, of a successful son rising in the world with a prestigious degree. They had reluctantly agreed, pouring thousands of dollars into my education. But now, instead of returning with a degree, I was back with tales of battles against imaginary foes. To say they were disappointed would be an understatement. When I tried to explain, to justify my actions, they just shook their heads. The once familiar living room felt hostile, their expressions distant and cold. "Son," my father began, his voice firm yet laced with sorrow, "we invested in your future, not your whims. You chose to attend college and we supported you, but now you've thrown it all away over a trivial disagreement." My mother, ever the softer touch, just sighed. Her eyes, usually bright with love and affection, were clouded with disappointment. "You had such promise, honey," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But you let your pride overrule your sensibilities." The following morning, they asked me to leave. They explained it wasn't a punishment, but a lesson in responsibility and the consequences of irrational decisions. I was outraged. First, my roommate and RA conspired against me, and now my parents were turning their backs on me too. But of course, I wasn't in the wrong. I was simply misunderstood, a victim of everyone else's unreasonable expectations. I now find myself crashing on a friend's couch, jobless and without a college degree. My story seems to be spiraling into one disaster after another. But no, I won't admit defeat. After all, I was still the hero of my tale. A hero fallen on hard times, perhaps, but a hero nonetheless. The world, it seems, is just not ready to understand my heroic stand against unfairness. Or so I keep telling myself. Well, talk about a fall from grace. From college hero to couch surfer champion, all over Rent. What do you think? Let us know in the comments section below. When you subscribe, be sure to click the notification bell. Click here for more Tangled threads.